Hey folks, thanks for joining. I wanted to welcome Alvin Wong from Tenant Landlord Mediation. Have I got that right?
TENANT LANDLORD MEDIATION, yes.
Tenant
TL.
Landlord Mediation, because he comes with this wealth of experience of dealing with landlords and tenants, and I think a very unique perspective, which I think will be very interesting to folks today. We're going to go over some of the key trends and issues that he's seeing between tenants and landlords, maybe some proactive stuff both sides can do to make what is sometimes a very contentious relationship a bit better. So, welcome, Alvin. Thanks very much for your time today. Maybe we can
Yeah.
start off with like how did you get into this? Like it's a very unique niche, and maybe like how you got into it and like the difference between what you're doing and like a lawyer does and a paralegal does.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks, Ming, for having me. My journey started when my very first property I bought, and I learned all my mistakes. I learned everything from there. I found a really, really great property in Windsor, 10 minutes from the waterfront, and it was listed for 249,000 during the 2020. And I was like, it's a duplex. Upstairs was vacant. Downstairs was there's a tenant, a family living there. And I thought this was the perfect opportunity for me to get into real estate investment. This is the perfect time for me to get into landlording and also being my own property management. So I dove deep into it, and everyone can see where this is heading towards. 1 month into owning this property, the tenant downstairs stopped paying me. And so while at that time, I found a new tenant that was upstairs. Okay, and I didn't do a good job vetting. I didn't do a good job being a so-called my own property management. Like everything that you can think of, all the tools that you can think of, like I didn't use any of that. If I knew what I knew back then, I would have like applied it and screened out better tenants. And upstairs tenant ganged up with the downstairs tenant. They decide to not both of them not pay me rent. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, okay? And because I was so novice being a landlord property management, I did everything. I did everything that I didn't do well in the negotiation. I didn't do well in actually, let's take that out. Like I didn't do I my confrontation with them wasn't like the approach that was to help them to see the value of leaving. And I wasn't really understanding the value of like seeing how we can. I wasn't If I was to compare to now, like I would have been really good with like in terms of talking to them, how to like see how we can find a place for them to go, etc. But essentially, they flat out told me that they didn't want to leave at all, and they find it very reasonably not paying me rent at all. So
Oh wow.
I went through the whole landlord tenant board to get both tenants out, and during that time, I had lost rents for 12 months. And I also had downstairs and upstairs tenant destroying my property. And the only reason why that I was able to get these two tenants out was because both tenants, started to harass people in the neighborhood. Downstairs slept with upstairs tenant's wife, so they started to hate each other and they started to have
Oh my
fist
god.
fights and
Oh my
and a
god.
lot of messy stuff happening. So police had to be involved. It was a nightmare. And
Wow.
from that day onward, I finally got vacant possession for both units because of that. But it really left me with a lot of nightmares. It also gave me a lot of stress. And it also not only damages financially, and most people would have just completely leave the landlord Ontario space. But I saw the value of providing shelter. I saw the value of building wealth. I saw the value of correcting housing issues that we have here in Canada. And I learned all the mistakes from there. I started to, instead of giving up, I started to buy more properties and started to be a better landlord. And also, now I'm doing my own property management for myself and other investors as well too. And along the way,
Awesome.
you learn to speak to tenants better compared to when I first started. I didn't know how to talk to tenants as what I am doing now. And I started to realize that there's a lot of other people that are suffering the same thing as me, and I'm very good with now talking to with tenants, seeing their needs, finding a win-win solution, finding an opportunity to where both sides can come to agreement. And that's how Tenant Landlord started. And I started with all my own properties, my five properties, and then my other like investor network started to ask for help, and I started to help them. And then from there, snowball. Like I realized there's a need for everyone, so I started, and from there onwards, like I started to help people all across Ontario, from as far as Timmins. That's how far I go up to. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. What? That's a wild story. I've heard some crazy stories, but that's pretty wild. I'm so glad I've never had that kind of experience. So, like, when does somebody engage you versus like a paralegal or a lawyer? Like, where does your services kind of fit in this spectrum of options for landlords who are maybe dealing with non-paying wife sleeping tenants?
Yeah, so the difference, back to your original question, and also this question you were talking, where I come in is before things escalate. So as soon as a landlord sees an issue where either they tried it themselves or they're just not comfortable engaging with the tenant, and as soon as the N4 situation and N12 situation, so N4 is where they start not paying you rent, and N12 is basically when they're selling the property, having a valid affidavit, meaning either the landlord's moving in or they're selling the property, so the buyer is moving in with a valid affidavit, meaning that they are intentionally moving. So typically there's a lot of resistance in that and it gets really tense. And so there's a lot of conflict that escalates. And sometimes it's just not, it doesn't make sense for the landlord and the realtor to do it themselves. And so they come to me to ask me to approach the tenant in a very respectful manner and a peaceful way to come up with a solution that helps both sides to either come up with some form of solution where both are happy. That's exactly what I do. And so essentially what's happening here is that everyone avoids court.
Yep.
Everyone is agreed to the terms so that there's no need for like escalating any more further of the situation and both sides are happy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I can see that because like I think what happens a lot of times is like maybe a landlord doesn't know what to do, pulls in a paralegal, and all of a sudden now like it's just escalated.
Correct.
Like a tenant is all of a sudden facing somebody who's in from the legal
Yeah.
field, communicating with them, and very very much I can see like defenses being raised. So
So,
it's good to
so
understand.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do work with paralegals as well too, but typically the landlords wants things to be dealt with before all legal things happen. Because once we start serving legal notices, once we start sending lawyers, paralegals, there's something about that it really makes things very tense. Okay. And what I realized that tenants are more willing to push back when they feel threatened because they just
Yeah,
feel
for
things
sure.
are fair. And this is exactly what tenants tell me. Like they don't feel fair. They feel like they're being threatened. I gotta protect my family, even though
Mhm.
the tenants maybe like I have some good tenants, but I also have tenants that are like similar to my case where they're not difficult tenants. I like to call them these difficult tenants, although they are wrong. But they still have that nature, that instinct that they still want to fight back, and they know their rights, and they know that this will drag on. The whole entire eviction process in LTB drags on to 8 to 12 months. They know this.
That's pretty crazy. Glad that your services are around. Like you've seen a lot of things happen, right? You've dealt with a lot of tenants and a lot of landlords over the years. What do you think some of the biggest mistakes landlords are making that end up causing like escalations, disputes, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it's very most landlords, I would say in my beginning of my journey, one of my biggest mistake was I got really emotional because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know there wasn't any services like what I'm providing, okay? And I knew that there was a service like that, I would have like at least taken a little bit softer approach because during that time, the tenant's not paying me rent. The tenant is destroying my property. A lot of floods of emotion happens. I go talk to the tenants and I tell them you gotta stop. And at one point, I did tell them, hey, like you gotta stop doing this or else I do have to call the police. I mean, that's kind of like a threat, right? So I learned all this mistake there, but you have to understand it's not the landlord's fault. It's the landlords are just it's natural for them to feel that emotion because the tenant is not paying you rent, the tenant is destroying your property. You have every right to be angry, but in this situation, you have to stay composed. So I find that having a third party mediator, whichever term you want to use, in this case, I'm the third party. It sets the environment neutral. The tenant is willing to be relaxed and talk to you. Whereas if the landlord goes up to the tenant, it might be a little bit different approach. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like it's too close.
Yeah,
It's too personal, right?
exactly.
So, like, are there strategies that a landlord can do to, I guess, help prevent escalation? Like, do you have any like you just see like these mistakes like
Yeah.
happening, or maybe you're brought in too late? Like, what are landlords kind of screwing up on?
Yeah. So again, like I would say the way how they approach the tenants, if you know that you're gonna be emotionally involved and you know that it doesn't matter whether it's anger, crying, if you know that you're not able to compose, it's better if you hire a professional so that
Step away.
it steps away.
Yeah.
What TLM does is it's literally a hand-holding process. We're not only hand-holding the landlord on the side, we're taking them away from the scenario, but we're hand-holding them in the background. But we're also hand-holding with the tenant as well too. So we'll be helping depending on the situation, for for the tenants that are good, we would definitely try to help them find a new place, help them with the process, help them like talk to the property manager, tell them the situation so that there's no miscommunication and everything. But realistically, like if the landlord can decompose and really speak to the tenant in a calm and professional manner, things could be good. But if you know that you cannot, and you know that you're gonna be angry or you're gonna be upset, it's better to have a professional to deal with it.
And at what point should somebody be engaging you for your services? Like, is there an optimal time that they should be giving you a call?
Yeah, so before the anything escalates, so as soon as someone stops paying you rent, immediately reach out to myself, paralegals. If the paralegals are willing to go to the person in person to speak with them. Myself, I speak to them in person so that it has a human connection. There's a one-on-one dialogue so that we can build trust together. So that's I would say that if it gets to the point where it's close to the end of the 8 to 12 months process. At that point, you may want to continue on with the court. At that point, it's like the tenant most likely will have to leave. So there's not really there's not really a TLM can help with that. But what I would say is that as early as possible, don't wait till the last minute. Um, and
Do you find you're like brought in too late a lot of the times, like once things are already too hot?
Yeah, I would say so. Like when it gets too late, like I said, 8 to 12 months, then it becomes very difficult to negotiate and mediate the situation. It's better to at that point, it's my was you should finish up everything. Yeah.
So, I mean, like you've seen a lot of these, been involved in a lot of these negotiations. Is there something that you wish like landlords understood more about tenants and vice versa? Is there something that, like, if you could bring the two together without the conflict and just trade information, is there something that you think like each could
Yeah.
learn from each other?
Yeah, I definitely for sure I learned a lot speaking with tenants. The good thing is that the thing what I see is that there's a different lens coming from two different sides. What I wish a landlord would know is that to really sit down and talk to the tenant, really hear from their side. What I realize is that there's a different side to the tenant they share. But when you're very clouded with hatred, when you're very clouded with emotions, you tend to forget about all that. Tenants are who they are. Like I'm talking about the difficult tenants. The difficult tenants came from a background where their family didn't taught them well, and then their family didn't taught them well. So it's a chain. It's a generational chain. I'm not saying that what they're doing to a landlord is acceptable, but when you start being compassionate, really understand where things are going, and then you start to realize where the story comes from. You start to really be empathetic, and you start to really understand their whole scenario, and you really want to work with them to figure out win-win situation. And if you're willing to show that you're willing to work with the tenant will stop their behavior and work with you as a solution. That's how I see it. Again, I'm not saying everyone's like that, but for a majority of my cases that I see, the difficult 10, there is a different side to it. There's a different story to it. And sometimes it's as simple as what the landlord has done in the past that triggered this as well too. And this is something I caught my landlord clients. They're like, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, I didn't see the perspective of that tenant. And I'm glad that
Yeah.
you're sharing this with me like that. Yeah.
No, that makes total sense. Like, I guess it's almost like if you can get the emotions aside
Yeah,
and then under like get to empathy almost, it's
yeah,
like that helps a lot. It helps both sides understand where things are coming from. So that makes a ton of sense.
absolutely.
I guess shifting now into like market, are you seeing any trends amongst things in the market, like a rise in, I don't know, rent evictions? Like, but we don't believe in rent evicting tenants, things like that. But
Yes.
like, are you seeing like any trends happening in the last, I don't know, year or two?
I'm not seeing, I don't have specific stats and I'm not very focused on that. What I can tell you is I'm getting called a lot in KWC and Hamilton and
Okay.
also as far as Windsor, Ontario. There's something going on in these three cities that has a lot of default on in terms of payments. And
Okay.
that's all I can share. Like I said, I don't
Yeah.
have the accurate data for this, but this is based on what I've been recording on my service. Like people has been asking me to where. So I've been going to these three cities quite a lot, and something's happening. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, that's really insightful because I don't think there are good statistics on these kind of things.
Yeah,
And really a lot of this stuff is like is personal experience, right?
correct.
Do you see N12s different in these cities too? Is it mostly N4 issues that you're seeing in those cities?
Mainly N4s. I'm seeing more people defaulting on their payments. It's very, very rare do I see too much N12s. I do get N12s here and there, but N12s are a little bit more scattered, so I don't have a really an accurate thing to share to you and your audience is where which city uses N12 a lot. Pretty much every single city I've been to all have at least used one or two N12s, but majority is all N4 related.
That's good to know. Like, I'd like to think that people who are like tenants who are facing N12 are a little bit more like maybe it's a little less emotional because it is, somebody truly has bought the house and they're looking to move into it. And non-payment can come from a lot of reasons, right? Like if somebody is hit up on hard times, I can see very
Yeah,
much so, especially with the economy the way it is, that, an N4 would be more common. And I don't call it more justifiable because you're right, it isn't right, but like I can see somebody like if I imagine myself, my family, if I'm not making an income, I still need a place for my family to live, right? So
correct. 12 is a little bit is very sensitive. There's people that are there's difficult tenants that are purposely not paying rent, but we are seeing we are seeing economic shifts in our economy, and you and I both know. This time of this recording, it's really tough. There's a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of things financially burdening to some of the tenants, and unfortunately some people default. And these are the good tenants I really enjoy working with, and I really do handhold them to find a new place. With a difficult tenant such as my case when I first started, like purposely tell the landlord in their face that they're not paying them rent. That's a little different scenario. I don't really do too much handholding finding them a place. But I do try to work with them a different type of scenario to see if there's a common ground where both the landlord and the tenant can part ways.
yeah, that's great. I mean, if I'm thinking about like our client base, so Volition clients tend to be Toronto specific investors. We do it primarily because we have, a higher paying, a little bit more sophisticated tenant profile. A lot of them have, professional jobs and things like that. Are there any tips you have for our clients to, a lot of them are in multifamily, like anything around like communication to keep relationships good, or is like anything that you can,
Yeah.
I would say almost you could advise to prevent having to call you. Like obviously, you know, uh, yeah, yeah, but yeah. Any tips there?
Yeah, absolutely. Primary prevention. I'm thinking of like the way how I would see it is screening process. Invest a lot of time in screening your tenant. I myself, and a very savvy investor like yourself, we have a very very exclusive tenant process that's very intense. For me, there's 15 hoops the tenant have to jump over before they get to the destination of renting my place, and I'm sure Volition has a similar process as well, because we both know Ontario landscape is very tough to have a difficult tenant removed. So we need to do our diligence really well. And the good thing about your clients is that they have you, so they're accessing your resources and they're accessing your education and also your years of your experience. So that's already number one prevention. So take advantage of great platforms to screen your tenants. We're talking about like front lobby, open room,
Okay, open room.
Open Room, Single Key. These are the three most popular platforms that yourself, myself, and all the other investors are using to prevent difficult tenants. And one thing that I have to say, I'm more focused on the issue where things starts to escalate. Absolutely, immediately engage the tenant, whether they're using me or not, or a paralegal. If they want to do it themselves, make sure you talk to the tenant immediately. Don't wait until I have some landlords that served the tenant at N4 3 months down the line. Like
Oh,
as soon as a situation happens, talk to the tenant. Don't serve the N4 yet. Talk to the tenant immediately. So let's just say first of every month. That's pretty traditional. So like the second day or the third day of that month of non-payment, just say Mr. or Mrs. Tenant, you've I noticed that you're late on your rent. Is there something that is not working, or is there something that's concerning? Can we discuss about this so that we can so I can understand a little bit more about your situation. Like how this is very empathetic, and also you're also trying to understand their situation and build from there.
yeah, yeah. Actually, I remember doing a bunch of that during COVID. I reached out to all my tenants and just like, hey, like, are you guys okay? Like, do you need like a pause on rents? Like, just tell me. Like, obviously we can't keep this up forever.
Correct.
But what was pretty amazing actually is one of my tenants, she was like, "We're good. Do you need money?" Right? I was really taken back by that. Like she was offering to help us.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, The other thing I would add on to your like list of good preventions,
Hmm.
and one of the biggest mistakes I see landlords making is buying a property on financials and then trying to find a tenant to fit it, right? Our philosophy is very much buy in the areas which already attract good tenant profiles and then find financials that fit that, right?
Yes.
Because now if you're getting a 8, 10, 12% cap rate on a property, there's usually a reason, right? Like the risk tends to be higher when you're into those kind of properties. So we very
Sure.
much take an opposite approach where it's tenant first, risk first, right? And then like, okay, now that I'm in a great neighborhood, which good tenants like to live in already, it's much easier that tenant
Yeah.
screening process because the people who are coming through now are people who are generally good tenants. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a very good point. I purchase properties that are in the A and B plus neighborhood for a reason, you know. Um,
yeah, absolutely. And in the beginning, my mistake was I was very simplistic in my risk analysis of things. It was like literally, does this place cash flow? If it does, then I will buy. And that is a terrible way to choose like how to buy a property. It's overly simplistic. So anyway, we you and I have both learned lots over the years.
yeah.
Let me wrap it up then with like if you could just give like one big piece of advice to, our clients, Toronto landlords or landlords in general, what would that golden nugget be?
Yeah, for sure. I speak to the tenant as like I'd speak to the tenant professionally and make sure to be composed, okay? um, if there's any problems, you know. So I definitely for sure like hear their side, sit down, talk to them, you know. Don't start off with the introduction. Don't start off with your introduction saying it's time to leave. You know, I see a lot of landlord. I know as simple as it sounds, but when emotions kicks in, you know, the first thing the landlord starts opening the conversation is it's time for you to leave.
Mm. Yeah, it's like starting with an escalation. Like,
Yeah,
don't do that.
exactly.
Yeah. Sounds like the advice is like de-escalate and don't be that source of
Yeah,
escalation. That sounds like what it sounds like.
absolutely.
Um, awesome. I mean, if people are interested in getting a hold of you, Alvin, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, so we tenant landlord mediation. So I'm very active in my Instagram. So my IG is TL mediation. That's TL mediation, and you can visit my website as www.winwithtlm.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Alvin. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll chat more in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the invite.